In the Australian outback, 850 kilometers north of Adelaide, the thermometer reached 53.9 degrees Celsius on a January afternoon in 1960. That is not the surface temperature of exposed rock. That is the air temperature in the shade. At that heat, a metal doorknob blisters the palm, the asphalt softens, and roughly 2,500 people decided to stay. They did not find a way to fight the heat. They went underground. Today I will show you 7 places where people built their lives in conditions designed to prevent it. Each place is more clearly declared dangerous than the one before it, and we will end at a location a government officially declared uninhabitable for 300 years. A decree backed by nuclear physics, international law, and the memory of 350,000 people who were forced to leave. More than 100 people are currently living there. They grow tomatoes. They have been asked to leave. They have not left. The axis for today is simple. Each place on this list extracts something more permanent from its residents than the last. By the end, what the final location extracts has a name that takes decades to die from. In the hills surrounding Coober Pedy, the Earth stays at exactly 23 to 24 degrees Celsius regardless of what the sky does. That steady temperature is why 60% of the town lives in it. Willie Hutchison was 14 years old when he found opal in this part of South Australia in 1915. What followed was a slow-motion rush. Miners arrived, drove tunnels into the soft sandstone ridges, extracted stone, and then kept the tunnels. The tunnels were cooler than anything they could build above. The tunnels became rooms. The rooms became homes. The homes became a city. Coober Pedy today holds an underground Serbian Orthodox church, its altar carved from solid rock and its frescoes painted on sandstone walls. The congregation descends to services the way miners descend to work. There is an underground motel with a bar, an underground museum, and an underground swimming pool. Above ground, the landscape surrounding the town looks like something that has been shelled repeatedly. Cratered, pale, stripped of anything growing. These are opal fields. More precious opal comes from Coober Pedy than any other location on Earth. The sinkholes are real. A sign at the edge of town instructs visitors not to run, because the ground here is riddled with old mine shafts, and the difference between the surface of the Earth and somebody's ceiling is sometimes less than a meter of sandstone. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. If the logic of underground cities has already unsettled you, subscribe. The 7 places on this list escalate. What follows makes the Australian desert look like a practical inconvenience. In 2006, the Blacksmith Institute, which tracks industrial pollution globally, listed Linfen as one of the 10 most polluted places on Earth. Its 3.4 million residents live in the coal capital of Shanxi province, surrounded by hundreds of mines, coking plants, and iron smelters that have operated for decades. Laundry left on an outdoor line in Linfen comes back black, not gray, black. Children in the outer districts show blood lead levels high enough to qualify for medical intervention under international health guidelines. The Fen River, which runs through the city center, carries industrial runoff that has eliminated most native fish within city limits. During peak coal production, Linfen's air quality index has exceeded safe limits by more than 30 times on monitored days. The local government announced a major cleanup in 2007. Hundreds of illegal small mines were formally shuttered. Official air quality readings from government monitoring stations improved. Measurements taken by independent research teams from outside Shanxi province have not matched the official figures. 3.4 million people live in Linfen. They did not arrive by accident. The coal industry employs a large fraction of the local population. The economic alternatives in rural Shanxi are few. Parents raise children in a city where breathing the outdoor air carries documented long-term consequences, because the poverty available elsewhere carries different ones. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. La Rinconada sits at 5,100 meters above sea level. The nearest city with a working hospital is 6 hours down a mountain road that washes out in rain season. The air here contains roughly half the oxygen available at sea level. In the early 1980s, La Rinconada held a few hundred miners. The price of gold tripled between 2001 and 2009. The population grew to somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 people in less than a decade. No one has an accurate count. There is no census bureau operating at this altitude. There is no sewage system, no running water. Mercury, used to extract gold from ore, has saturated the ground and the streams that run downhill into the Ramis River Basin and from there into Lake Titicaca. The payment system is called cachorreo. A miner works 30 consecutive days for no wage. On the 31st day, he is permitted to carry out of the mine whatever ore he can carry on his body. How much gold that ore contains, no one tells him in advance. It is a lottery backed by muscle and altitude sickness. Most miners develop chronic respiratory disease within 2 years of arriving. The average life expectancy for an active miner at La Rinconada is 30 to 35 years. That figure comes from local health workers. No government agency has a permanent presence here to verify or dispute it. Imagine arriving in La Rinconada for the first time on a clear Tuesday morning. The road from Puno takes 6 hours, and for the last 2 the vehicle climbs terrain that makes even acclimatized Peruvians press their hands against their temples. When you step out, the headache starts within minutes. After 3 days, most visitors still wake gasping at 2 in the morning. The miners who live here were born at lower elevations too. Their bodies adapted over years, their lungs adapted less well. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. The crater lake at Kawah Ijen is the largest acid lake on the surface of the Earth. Its pH has been measured as low as 0.13. The pH of battery acid is approximately 0.8. Water at 0.13 dissolves the clothing of the men who work beside it within weeks. It has been known to dissolve the skin. Sulfur miners descend into this crater every morning. They breathe sulfur dioxide concentrations that would trigger mandatory emergency evacuation in any regulated industrial facility in Europe or North America. Most wear cloth masks. Some have bought gas masks out of their own wages. They chip solidified sulfur from the fumarole pipes, load it into wooden baskets balanced across their shoulders, and carry 80 to 90 kilograms up the crater wall and 3 kilometers to the way station at the rim. The round trip takes between 4 and 6 hours. They are paid roughly $13 per load. There is no formal employment agreement. There is no workers' compensation scheme. When a miner develops chronic obstructive pulmonary disease in his late 30s, and most of them do, there is no mechanism to compensate him. His children, if they cannot find other work in East Java, often return to the crater. Stand at the rim of Kawah Ijen at dawn and look down. The lake is a specific shade of turquoise that appears in almost no other natural body of water on Earth. At night, the burning sulfur produces a blue flame that photographers travel thousands of kilometers to see. The men carrying 90-kilogram loads through toxic gas do not look at the flame. They are watching their footing on volcanic rock. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. On May 27, 1962, the Centralia Borough Council authorized a group of volunteers to burn the town's municipal landfill before Memorial Day. The landfill sat in an abandoned strip mine pit. The fire reached an exposed vein of anthracite coal. Before anyone understood what had happened, the fire was underground. It has been burning for 63 years. Centralia once held around 1,100 residents. Pennsylvania condemned the remaining properties in 1992. Route 61, the main road through town, buckled, cracked, and began exhaling carbon monoxide through its surface. It was closed. Today, the abandoned stretch of highway is covered in graffiti, left by visitors who come to look at the cracks and the heat vents. In winter, snow melts in irregular patches along the old road, where heat rises from below. In certain spots, the ground temperature just below the surface is high enough to burn bare skin. 5 residents remain by formal agreement with the state, permitted to live out their lives in Centralia before the properties revert to the Commonwealth upon their deaths. One of them is John Lokaitis Jr., who grew up there and watched the evacuation happen around him. He tends the graves at the Catholic cemetery that still stands above the fire. His family is buried there. He has no intention of leaving. Geologists estimate the coal seam could continue burning for another 250 years. No extinguishing method currently reaches it. The fire exists now below the water table in several locations. Removing it would require removing the cemetery first. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. Norilsk sits 300 kilometers above the Arctic Circle on permafrost. The nearest city connected by road is more than 1,500 kilometers away. There is no road to Norilsk. To leave, residents take a plane or wait for the seasonal river barge that operates roughly 3 months out of 12. This means 177,000 people live in a city they cannot casually exit. The Soviet Union built Norilsk using gulag labor beginning in 1935. Historians estimate that 17,000 to 18,000 prisoners died during its construction, mainly from cold, exhaustion, and accidents in the mines. The men who built the city are interred in the permafrost beneath it. Their names were withheld from public records for decades. The copper and nickel smelters at Norilsk release approximately 1.9 million metric tons of sulfur dioxide per year. That figure places Norilsk among the single highest point sources of sulfur dioxide on the planet. The Daldikan River turned bright red in 2016 after an industrial spill. Trees cannot survive within 30 kilometers of the smelter stacks. Soil samples around the city contain heavy metal concentrations exceeding Russian federal limits by factors up to 35. One interpretation is that the salaries available in Norilsk's mining and smelting industry are far above the Russian average, and that residents have made a rational economic calculation. The other interpretation looks at the flight prices, the absence of roads, and the difficulty of extracting any financial value from Norilsk real estate, and concludes that leaving is not a real option for most families. Write in the comments which explanation you find more accurate. But what follows Norilsk received a designation that industrial pollution data alone has never produced. Not a health warning, a legal determination that human life should not exist in this location at all. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. Remember the location from the beginning, the one declared uninhabitable for 300 years. We are here now. On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. In the months that followed, Soviet authorities evacuated approximately 350,000 people from a 2,600 square kilometer zone surrounding the plant. The city of Pripyat, built specifically for plant workers and their families, was emptied in 36 hours. Residents were told to take documents and food for 3 days. They were told they would return. The streets have been empty since. The forests surrounding the reactor turned red from radiation exposure within days of the explosion. For years they stood without decomposing, because the bacteria and fungi that cause decomposition had died too. Scientists monitoring the zone discovered the expected succession of wildlife returning after human absence: wolves, horses, wild boar, but also anomalies in their biology that remain actively studied and not yet fully explained. Within months of the evacuation, people began returning. In Ukrainian, they are called samosely, self-settlers. They were mostly elderly women who had been relocated to urban apartments in distant cities and found the displacement more threatening than the radiation. Some returned within weeks. Others came back after years of failing to adapt elsewhere. By 1990, approximately 1,200 samosely were living inside the exclusion zone. The Ukrainian government stopped expelling them sometime in the early 1990s. Today, roughly 100 to 130 remain. Most are in their 70s, 80s, or 90s. One of the most documented was Maria Shovkoplias, living in the village of Parashiv. She grew tomatoes, onions, and potatoes in soil that radiation monitoring classifies as unfit for agriculture. She said she had nothing to fear from radiation because she intended to die in her garden, not in a hospital in Kyiv. One camp of researchers studying the samosely has found that their cancer rates are not statistically higher than those of age-matched Ukrainian women who were evacuated and never returned. The proposed explanations: elderly metabolisms absorb radionuclides less efficiently, the women eat locally grown food which does contain cesium-137, but at lower effective doses than feared, and they avoid the most contaminated areas because they know the terrain. The other camp argues that the sample size is too small for statistically reliable conclusions, and that health records for isolated rural women in post-Soviet Ukraine are not complete enough to trust. Write in the comments which camp you find more persuasive. They were told the zone was uninhabitable for 300 years. Most of them were already old when the decree was issued. They calculated that the bureaucratic timeline and their own timeline were different documents. No authority has ever declared this place safe. They call it home. 7 places. An underground city beneath a desert. A river poisoned with coal running through 3.4 million people. A mountain with no hospital within 6 hours and no sewage at any altitude. An acid crater where men carry 90 kilograms through gas that dissolves cloth. A coal fire burning silently for 6 decades under a graveyard. an Arctic industrial city with no exit road and permafrost full of unnamed dead, a nuclear exclusion zone whose prohibition outlives the people it was meant to protect. The question the list poses is not why governments failed to make these places safe. It is why people remain in them when they are clearly dangerous. The answer is the same in every case, and it is not recklessness. The miners at La Rinconada are not there because they fail to understand mercury. They are there because the poverty below the mountain offers no lottery at all. John Lakaitis in Centralia is not there because he misread the warning signs. He is there because his family is in the ground and he is not finished being near them. The samosely of Chernobyl did not fail to read the nuclear physics. They read it and concluded that 300 years is a government's timeline, not theirs. People do not choose impossible places. They choose what they cannot leave behind, and the place is just the shape of that thing. The danger is documented. The population is real. The calculation each person made is not the one we would make from a safe distance, looking at a map. It is the one made from inside, where the thing you would lose by leaving has weight. Share this with someone who has never had to make that calculation.